Hello, what a great turnout. Wow. Welcome, everyone. I just want to take a minute and say, as the owner of the Holiday Inn, what an honor it is to host this event tonight. It really is. And to work closely with John and the Battlefield Park Alliance. John has, and the Battlefield Park Alliance has elevated the awareness of our rich local history so much in the last few years. It's incredible. And I want to thank everyone that takes time out of their daily lives to come and support our history and listen and learn a little more about it, and we really appreciate that. So thank you. You know, our community values our history and the people that have been here before us, and it's one of the things that make what place we call home, Lake George, so special. So thank you very much. With that said, we have John Eric Nelson to speak on the attack on Fort. I'm not going to say it the French way. Thank you.
Not yet.
Thank you. Yes, we got John Eric does vocal exercises, kind of like the great opera stars. So we got to get a little bit of chance to gargle internally. But I want to say it's been a spectacular few weeks for Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance. I'm very grateful for all of you for your support. Here's what's been happening, really since the season started, but just to take the last month, we had a beautiful Memorial Day ceremony, as we do each year, at the burial site of the 4 unknown soldiers from the French and Indian War. Beginning June the 2nd, we had archaeology, which is still going on. It's about to wind up, led by Skidmore College anthropology chair, Siobhan Hart. And they're actually finding more and more things this year that speak to the history of our ground. So that's really great news. Last Saturday, in fact, Professor Hart made a presentation on the findings thus far at Battlefield Park, but also more generally what archaeology, anthropology do, and what the benefit of it is to humanity when we're smart. Earlier this week, in addition to the archaeology, we had at our park the statue rehabilitation, restoration. I'm happy to tell you that has been completed. The sculptures that we know have been spectacularly refreshed. I encourage you to go over there, and I'd love for all of you to join us a week from tomorrow, June the 27th, at 1 o'clock, when we have a formal ceremony to rededicate these works of art and history. But please take a trip over there at your convenience. It'll be worth it. They're all refreshed, waxed. The missing pieces, like the cross on Isaac Joe's left hand, has been restored. The missing tomahawks around the Johnson Hendrick statue have been replaced. The arrows that were missing from the Mohawk warrior have been replaced, and all have good shine to them and things like that. We're very proud. These sculptures date back to, in the case of the Johnson Hendrick sculpture, to 1903. So in and of themselves, they become a part of our history here at Lake George. And I know, just like people have the recollection of Fort William Henry as a child, I know a lot of people remember being at Battlefield Park and seeing those gigantic, as we perceive them, bronze sculptures that are now looking fresh again. And of course, coming up, we have the reinterment of the 44 different Continental soldiers and others who were here in the summer of 1776. That's been approved by the state as of last year. It's been fully funded through the state, through private donations. I know many of you have given to that. That's on target for a breaking of the ground beginning right after Labor Day this year with a May 22nd, 2026 dedication ceremony. So a lot to look forward to, a lot going on, and again, it wouldn't happen if you folks didn't want it. So we thank you for that. John Eric Nelson, what can you say about John Eric? Zero, you want to? No.
Nothing.
Okay. But not only is he a fantastic source of knowledge and communications about the French and Indian War, but he's committed as well to the American way of life. I mean, this man won't tell you about it, but He actually did 2 tours of duty in Vietnam during the sections, even though he doesn't look that old. So he's truly an American hero, the kind of people we celebrate on our holidays here. And John Eric has made a specialty of learning about the French Indian War, particularly in this region, the Lake George, Lake Champlain region. And we're very interested in what his perceptions are on the ill-fated attack on Fort Carillon by the British in 1758. Ladies and gentlemen, John Eric Nelson.
John told me that this is going to be a very difficult, cantankerous audience. And he's not sure which way you're going to go. He said it could be tomatoes thrown at me or coins. So I had a brainstorm and I said, I'm going to get me this plastic bag. All I want you to do is if you're throwing tomatoes, just yell tomato and I can wear the bag. If it's coins, I can open it up and catch the coin. So help me out with that. With a little levity there. No, as was mentioned, thank you so much for coming out tonight to share history with us. I know a lot of you know as much or more than I do about this time frame. And as we go through these conferences and lectures and stuff, we always come up with new ideas or new perspectives or views the way we want to look at it. And so we want to do that tonight. So again, thank you for coming out, taking time from your schedules. Why do we care about the Battle of Carillon in 1758? Well, more casualties occurred at Ticonderoga at Carillon on that July 8th day, on a single day, than any battle until the Battle of Antietam during the Civil War. So in that one battle, nearly 2,000 casualties took place, over. So it's important. While they were gathering here, the British were in the area we are in right now. This was the 3rd largest city for a short period of time in North America. So just imagine the humanity that was stacked up here. So this is an important part, especially for anyone who lives in this area. Now, I'm going to do this a couple of different things that I normally would do. So first of all, how many people are going on the 30th on the boat tour up north? Oh, great. Okay. So the first few minutes, I'm going to spend time on the Battle of Snowshoes because we'll be going by Rogers Slide, and I want to give you a perspective of what happened on that day. So when you do the boat trip, you'll have an idea. So those slides will be in green. And it's also important for our summer campaign we'll talk about for the most part is that Rogers loses a tremendous number of experienced rangers. And one of the problems with the campaign is lack of intelligence and lack of reconnaissance. So that battle there plays a big point in that slide. Now the slides from then on, if it's a dark maroon slide, it's what's going on with the British. If it's a blue slide, it's what's going on with the French. So keep that in mind when you see the slide. Oh, one too many. The Battle of Snowshoes, March 13, 1758. They wanted to go up and get prisoners for intelligence and find out what's going on up near Carillon and Crown Point. So Rogers is sent out to do this. He leaves from Fort Edward. Remember, there's no Fort William Henry now, got burned down. And they're going to go all the way up Lake George, and they're going to go to Friends Point and then go across country and get up to what is today the the golf course in Ticonderoga. Now, it starts out really well, but the officer in charge cuts his force in half. So he does not have enough people. The second thing goes wrong. Everybody in the world knows that he's coming. So it's not a surprise. So it's a major problem. So they begin marching north. They go past the ruins of Fort William Henry, where we're sitting near. And then they reach, on the 12th, they reach up near Friends Point. They have a cold camp there. Now, From then, they're going to go behind Rogers Rock. They called it, the French called it Mount Pelly or Bald Mountain at the time. So their French Points is here. They're going to go up behind that and come up. That's about where the golf course is. What they hope to do is intercept the French patrols that follow that blue line around. They go from Carillon over here, down along the Trout Brook, over the gap between Rogers Rock today and Cook Mountain, and then back up along the ice or along the edge. That was the French patrol road they patrolled. And the Rangers were hoping they could capture somebody. So they move up close the next day, and they're up near the golf course, and you'll notice there's a lot of golf balls in there from me. I don't know how they got in there because I never miss. And they set up an ambush, and they start to see some French coming down the Trout Brook. They jump on that first group and basically annihilate it. Now he breaks one of his own rules. The men just panic and run down the hill and start plundering and scalping the French. But what happens is another group comes up behind them, a bigger group, and the Rangers are just decimated and they have to get out of there very quickly. So why do we care about this as far as Rogers Slide and Rock? And what happens is the golf course is here at sundown around 4 o'clock. Remember, this is March. It gets dark early. They've been out all day. There's about 4 feet of snow on the ground. So they start to retreat, the ones that can. Now the controversy comes in, how did they get out of there and where did they go? Some certainly would have gone back the way they came, back down toward French Point where you see the green. Others would have gone in the gap between Cook Mountain and Rogers Rock, which is the white. Then the story says Rogers was up on top of Mount Pelly and he slid down that face of that rock. Right there. I don't think so. So this is what the gap looks like between, this is Rogers Rock over here, this is Cook Mountain. So the yellow would be there. And this would be the retreat from the golf course. You can see where that gap is. Now, a third way to get off that thing that I've done with snowshoes in the winter, and it is doable, is there's a gully right there that comes down into the Rogers Rock campground, and it is very doable. I do not believe he ever went down that slide. And I think he either went this way, came up, and then went back, or he came up this way and then came down the slide that way. This is what the Rogers Rock would look like with ice on the lake. So this is what the Rogers Rock would look like, again with ice and snow. He did not come down that rock. I'm sorry. I know he's tough, but he didn't do that. Now, there are a couple French entries in their journals that say the next morning they did see Rogers and some of his men going on the ice. But they don't tell you, was it over here where Hart's Bay is, or was it over here by Friends Point? Because from the top they could see either, and he would have been long gone. So it could have been either that purple route I showed you, or coming down that gap. So for the battle, when we get there, Rogers loses approximately, and I'm going to throw numbers at you tonight. Always take numbers with a grain of salt, because you'll find them all over the place. You'll even find them all over the place in primary sources, people that were actually there, because they don't remember or they wrote their journal months later, etc. So take the numbers with a grain. I'm giving you the numbers that I think are the best at this point. So Rogers will send back, and John Starks, who we know about later in Rev War history, will come up with a relief column. When it's all said and done, Rogers loses 102 men killed out of 183 that went there. The French numbers are all over the place, but basically they claim they only lost 27 killed or wounded. I think there are probably more than that, especially in that first group that got clobbered. But again, please take the numbers with a grain of salt. All right. Again, as I'm talking, it's going to be a long one, so if something catches your attention, just scream out and I'll try to answer it there. Don't save it to the end. You will not offend me. You'll not throw me off my lousy current trend. So where does this thing stand at the end of 1757? Okay, the French have been doing a great job, and they had Fort Necessity in 54, the Monongahela with Braddock in 55, Oswego when Montcalm burns down Oswego in 56, and then William Henry gets destroyed in 57. All the British had to show is the 55 campaign right here at Lake George, and also they captured a garrison up above Nova Scotia at Fort Beauséjour. At the end of 57, England is not very happy with the way things are going. So there's a new leadership. William Pitt the Elder is now the Secretary for the Southern Division, which takes care of the colonies. Basically, he's Prime Minister. And the Newcastle is taking care of the financial. So this Newcastle, Pitt, they changed the emphasis of the war. They believe in a global war. So they're not going to just stay on the continent of Europe. They're going to go all over. India, Africa, and particularly the Caribbean. Because they want to cut off French trade and starve them financially. And Pitt has a much greater interest in North America than previous administrations. And he has this idea to have a British Empire when it's done. So the first thing he does, he replaces Lord Loudon, who was in command in 57. General James Abercrombie is placed in command in North America. He had been in North America for a year under Loudon. He takes over. Now Loudon is sent home. Abercrombie is a great logistics guy. He's not a tactician. So what Pitt does at the behest of the king is appoint Lord Augustus Howe to be the tactical guy. And if you want to go what if he does not die in this battle, what ifs are, you can fly all over the place. The 58 campaign that Pitt comes up with is Forbes is going to go out to Pittsburgh to take Duquesne, and Abercrombie is going to go up to Carillon and take Crown Point. General Amherst, with the largest army, is going to go up to Cape Breton Island and attack Louisbourg. So that's the campaign. Now, Pitt also makes concessions to the colonials because there's problems. So he says the Crown's going to give you arms, tents, provisions, and pay for transportation. But the big one is this. He changes how the ranking system goes for provincial officers. Prior to this, the lowliest ensign or lieutenant in the British Army outcommanded any colonel or general or any provincial officer in rank. So now he says you will be below a British officer of the same rank. That really appeased the colonials. So he increases the number. Originally, this is what 57's numbers look like for the colonies. And just to show you, Massachusetts in 57 was asked to have 1,800 men, and now in 58, they're going to go to 7,000. And Connecticut the same way, up and down. At the same time, the largest force ever in North America is going to come. 2,400 British regulars are going to go. The bulk of them are going to go with Amherst up to Louisbourg. But 6,000 are going to be on the Carillon expedition. So first thing they got to do, remember there's nothing here. Fort William Henry got burned down, all the boats, bateaus, everything's burned here. There's a few bateaus and things down at Fort Edward, a few things along the way to Albany, but everything has to be replaced. Lieutenant Governor James M. Delancey is appointed to organize the construction. They have to come up with a fleet of 900 bateaus, whaleboats, 130 barges, and a number of artillery there. Captain Loring is also ordered to start building the fleet. So they start heavy construction in Schenectady and Albany, and they're going to put John Bradstreet in charge of building this. That's a story that needs to be told. Now, my good friend Ian McCullough wrote 1758 raid, the Frontenac campaign, but somebody needs to write the story of the early of Bradstreet. He did a tremendous job with the logistics, building the boats, moving them up there. At the same time, in Massachusetts, Governor Pinal collects and sends 200 whaleboats from Massachusetts up to Albany. There's a massive shortage of arms. Remember, Oswego went belly up, so the British lost the arms there. William Henry goes up, so they lose all the arms there. Plus, they just lose them. So there's a tremendous shortage. So Abercrombie finesses the guy running around in Albany and New York City trying to pick up every musket they could possibly find. They don't have any tools for laying a siege, entrenching tools and so forth. So they're running around trying to get supplies. That takes time. One of the complaints is the Army didn't get into the field until late. Part of it was they didn't have the equipment. The Army begins to move north in May and June. And this is Connecticut Sergeant Sizer, and he talks about 6 to 7 man crews moving up against the tide, and they have to load and unload the boats 4 times. And that must have been a back-breaking job, just to go a few miles, unload, load again, and then portage around. They also got to go by land. And because there's steady rain all the time, and now you remember, we're talking 12 to 14,000 men with wagons, oxen, horses. They're tearing that military road from Fort Edward up here to William Henry to pieces. And you read the journals, they've got wagons. Horses are dying, oxen are dying, or just getting worn out. And wagons are just broken and abandoned along the roadway. Now I'm using a Forbes campaign, but Bradstreet will use similar numbers to say what he needs. So every day, 200 to 300 wagons are going from Fort Edward up here to William Henry. Now this is interesting. So wagons, you need 4 horses or wagons plus a driver. Now remember, we're up here in a wilderness. Where are you finding all those? Albany gets stripped pretty quickly. Now they're supposed to be able to carry 2,000 pounds, but if you put more than 14 to 1,500 pounds, a wagon breaks right away. It takes 1,000 pounds for 1 man for 4 months. And you got 12 to 14,000 men up here, and so forth. And then you need fodder for the horses and oxen. They don't need acorns. So they need something. That means you got to lug that stuff up, and there's not a lot of farms up past Saratoga. And they have trouble, of course. Nobody wants to give up their horse or wagon, and nobody wants to be going up there as a driver because they get killed. So again, that's Forbes, but same thing's happening here. And the same thing's happening down in Pennsylvania with Forbes' campaign. He's having the same problems. It doesn't change. So the Army slowly is gathering up. The provincials are straggling in. Connecticut's one of the last groups. They just get there a few days before the campaign kicks off on the 5th of July. New Hampshire, my lost boys of New Hampshire, remember, they weren't here for the 55 thing. They got lost on the way. They get lost again. So they show up 2 days after the Army marches north or sails north. Okay, so now again, blue is what's going on in the French. So in June, up in Montreal, they start to get prisoners and information. And they figure out right away that they're starting to move troops up to Fort Edward, the British that is, and it's probably going to be an attack on Carillon. And this is from Bougainville's journal. Bougainville is the aide-de-camp to General Montcalm. He will gain fame by being a navigator in the Pacific later. Now, up north, they're having problems with their leadership too. There's a clash of leadership. At this point, the governor, Vaudreuil, is in command of everything in New France. He's the military commander. Montcalm is not. So Montcalm has to do what Vaudreuil says. So Vaudreuil wants to send 300 men with Lévis out, 3,000 men out toward Niagara, and he wants to try to intimidate the western tribes out there, the Haudenosaunee, basically the Seneca and Cayugas, and get them to come to the French side. By having 3,000 Frenchmen out there, he thinks he's going to intimidate it. So, and again, this is a comment by Bougainville. I see with grief growing misunderstanding between our leaders. So things ain't good up there, down here. Leaders are not having a good time. Montcalm finally arrives at Carillon on June 30th, and this is what he has. He has 3,111 troupes de terre. Troupes de terre are the British, senior moment. Nelson, it's the French. The French troops from the continent, so the regular French troops. He has 450 troupes de la marine, that's from New France. He also has 250 militia, as we count. He has very few warriors. The tribes are still mad at Montcalm because he didn't let them plunder and get more prisoners the year before at William Henry, and there was a tremendous outbreak of smallpox. So he does not have a lot of native warriors. So total, again, numbers with a grain of salt. He has 3,826 men at Carillon before this battle goes. British Army at Lake George between June and July 4th. Provincials are coming up. Some of them haven't even got their muskets. The Massachusetts troops don't even get muskets until 2 weeks before they actually leave Albany and come up to Lake George. So they have to learn how to shoot them, and they have to learn how to drill. And here's two examples. The troops are out here. Some of our men did shoot one of the regulars through the head, which killed him dead. And then down here, this is another Connecticut guy down here. The general formed us up, the Connecticut troops now, and we learned how to form to the left and the right. So they're learning how to be military men. They're not military men. Okay, back up north. The French scouts are reporting to Montcalm on the 30th that the strength of the British continues to increase at the Lake George village, the head of the lake. They're moving supplies up very quickly, and there's no doubt that the British are coming up to get Carillon. Interesting, the numbers that they're getting, 20 to 25,000. So they're overestimating. The British will do the same thing. General Abercrombie reaches Lake George on the 26th, and at that time, this is what he has at the head of Lake George, right down the road here. Regular troops all ranked 6,200, and provincials, all colonies, all ranked 9,280 for 15,550. Now remember, they're not all going up to Carillon. They're going to be strung on the way. Some are going to be at Saratoga, Halfway Brook. Some have to stay here at the head of the lake. So they're going to be strung up. So they're not all there at one time. On the 27th, the Army is busy. They're building bateaus, making scoops, paddles, doing all that stuff. And Moneypenny is one of the aides for Abercrombie. So that's what's going on here. Back up north. Montcalm now, on July 1st, this is just 5 days before the British are going to embark, 8 days before the battle. The General Montcalm is walking around Ticonderoga, and he's laying out where he's going to put his fortifications. He chooses the heights of Carillon, and that's the map. But that's what it looks like. So the fort's out here. This would be coming from the town of Ticonderoga. This is the heights. Now, when they built the fort in 1755, Lobinier, the French engineer, anticipated that that fort needed to concentrate on the heights, because if you put artillery on that height, the fort is gone. And that's what's going to happen the next year in 59. He also says no one is to cut the trees down on the heights of Carillon. So he tells everybody, you want firewood or building wood, you got to go out across the lake or somewhere else. You can't cut the stuff on the heights of Carillon. And the comment made is interesting. We lack manpower. This is Bougainville, the aide-de-camp to Montcalm. And perhaps time is also lacking. Time is going to be critical. And they think audacity is going to be their savior. On the 2nd, up there in Carillon, to carry out these works, everyone is going to have strong arms. And so when they start doing, the officers will strip their coats and be in their shirts and help the troops do that. And again, he mentions, and time granted us by the enemy. So time is there. And how do we do with so few people? How are we going to do this? These are from Bougainville's journals. So the disposition of the French troops at this time at Carillon. There's the fort, small force is there. The bulk of the French are down in downtown Ticonderoga, down by the waterfall and the sawmill. They're on both sides of the Lachute, over by Mount Hope, if you know where that is, the police station, and also right in that main area there. They've got forward posts at the pontoon bridge, which is out by Mossy Point. And they've also got at the little group right here at the bridge to go to the fort, up to the fort. So that's their disposition. On the evening of July 4th, one day before the British start to move up, this evening departed under Langy, a group of men, they go down to the lake to try to get prisoners. They come back and they report that the British are getting ready to move forward. July 3rd and 4th, back down here at the head of the lake, the bateaus are being ordered. Now, if you read some of these orders, again, Abercrombie is a logistics guy. They number the boats. Each regiment has their boats numbered. They put guards on the boats, and some other provincial or regular group can't steal them. And they put so many barrels of everything. Everything is figured out. He's not a dummy. People think he's a dummy. He is really good at what he knows how to do, and that's logistics. So they've got 900 bateaus. They've got artillery barges, and now they're getting ready to go. And when the whole thing is strung out on the 5th, it's estimated that it's a mile wide, and by the time it gets to the Narrows, it's strung out 7 miles. Dawn on the 5th, the fleet embarks. And again, here's this order for how the boats are going to be. And again, Abercrombie's meticulous in this. And by the way, next year in 59, Amherst is going to use the same configuration, put the people in the same places. Everybody's labeled where they're supposed to be. Every regiment, every troop, etc. And this is our diorama over in our visitor center. If you haven't seen it, get over there. Now, this is one of the quotes. A fleet, bright with banners, cheer with martial music, moves stately procession down the lake, and with hope and pride. And again, the British think they're going to wipe the French off the map. And how couldn't you? French only got 4,000 guys. We got 15,000. We're going to kick their butt. They're going to be gone. How could we lose? They go up through the Narrows. And then, on the afternoon of the 5th, they reach Sabbath Day Point, which is right there. This is off Black Mountain, by the way. The view there. They are reminded very quickly to cost the war. The previous year at Sabbath Day Point, which is 24 miles from where we are today, there was a murderous defeat of Colonel Parker's troops, where he lost 300 out of 350 men in his command. And the journals talk about seeing the bones and equipment and skeletons in the water and not in the water, and both on land and water we saw the traces thereof. And that's by a Royal American officer of the 60th. Back up north on the 5th, the arrival of 3 captains of the Canadian de la Marine. So, and they get 150 more Canadians join that force that we talked about a minute ago. And the people are cheering and yelling and screaming, yeah, we got 150 more men. Now, when POWs are taken by the British, they tell the Abercrombie, oh, we're expecting thousands to come. We just got 5,000 guys, so we're ready to take you on. So again, now, scouts are sent out down to Mount Pelée, or Rogers Rock as we know it today, and they start to see signs that the British are starting to move. So they're going to go and get there. The evening of the 5th, at Sabbath Day Point, camp is made. Abercrombie, Lord Howe is actually the tactical commander. He orders that camps be made, food be cooked. And that also allows his fleet, remember they're strung out for 7 miles, so it allows everybody to catch up. The afternoon of the 5th, at 4 o'clock, Langy returns, and now they're again. They've been down near Fort George, which they're calling this area, and they've seen the advanced fleet start to move up. That's from the LARTEC. And all the troops are now ordered to be on very alert status, as they know the British are on their way. The evening of the 5th, at 5 o'clock, Langy comes back with his detachment, and again, has seen evidence that the advanced guard of the British are heading this way. So we need to get going here. So the order is sent to start to break down the camp in the center of Ticonderoga. Remember, that's where the bulk of the army is. So they start knocking down their tents and getting their equipment and moving them back up to Carillon, up to the fort. This is scouts that are sent out. So they've got scouts on Rogers Rock. They've got scouts over here, which is today the Ticonderoga Beach. They've got at Mossy Point, they've got an advanced post, probably about 150 guys there. And they've also guarding that pontoon bridge there. They also have some on the other side of the Lachute, because somebody said the British might want to swing around this way. So that's where the French have their outposts. At 11:30 in the evening on the 5th, the boats at the British at the Seventh Day Point are now reloaded, and the British start to move out under cover of darkness. They're ordered to bank their flames. They leave some guys back to keep stoking it. They're hoping to trick the French into the fact that they're not there. So at 0400 hours on the morning of the 6th, the beginning of the van of the fleet of the British comes to Rogers Rock. They're right in here in Cook Bay. So this is from Rogers Rock. So they're all in here, all in here. So scouts are sent out early in the morning. I don't know, that's one good looking guy, I gotta tell you. Pre-dawn on the 6th, at 1 o'clock in the morning, musket shots come out. And they think there's some Indians out there, musketry. And that's a little interesting because they're not, Johnson's Indians haven't gotten here yet. So my only thinking on that one is it could be Rangers, Stockbridge Indians from the Ranger group that are there. So they repulse them, send them back. So this is where everybody is at this point on the French side. So they have people up on Rogers Rock. They've got that over by the Time Beach. They've got a good group here. And this is what it looks like from the water flow, you guys that are going on the boat trip. And then they've still got the large part of the army sitting right in the center of Ticonderoga. And they've got people over here where the pontoon bridge is and on both sides. So that's what it looks like there. The way is cleared. Order is given to move forward. And at 0600 hours, the Rangers push forward toward the landing zone. On top of Rogers Rock, or Mont Pelé, this is Gary Zaboli print of it. This is what it looks like in real life from top of Rogers Rock. These guys wake up as sun is coming up. Now imagine what they said. Holy. I did that for you ladies. But imagine that. So he's got about 350 guys up here, and they look down and they see this. And remember, this thing is stretching back 7 miles. So just imagine when they go, oh boy, Mr. Custer, we're in big trouble. Okay, so at 0400, what's going on up at the French? So the French now have noticed up on Rogers Rock, they've seen over here Bernard over by the beach, on Thai Beach, he sees, and they start to say, everybody, we need to go back to the falls and break up that camp and send them back. So these guys here start to shoot at the British a little bit and then fall back. They don't do any good. Now, the ones on Rogers Rock are still up there. But Langy and Trapezak, with their 350 men, are deserted by their Indian guys. This blows my mind. So for the next 12 hours, they're wandering around all over Trout Brook. That makes no sense to me if you think about it, because basically, from Rogers Rock, from the Gap, that's the French patrol road we saw in that first slide I showed you on the Battle of Snowshoes. How the hell some of those Frenchmen out of 350 didn't know how to go home? You know? So they either want to cross the top of the mountains that you see here, which is Cook and then Bear Mountain, or they went down that Shrub Brook Valley and somehow they got turned around. Because you just follow the darn brook and you're there. But for 12 hours, they're wandering around. Now, this is the landing zone from the top of Cook Mountain. That's Prisoner Island, by the way, which we'll talk about in a minute. But this is where they're going to land. They're going to land all in here on the western side of that area. This is what it looks like. So this is the main landing zone. That's what it looks like from the water. This is that hook. Now the French are right in here. Okay, and that's that area right there. So that's what it looks like from the water. At 0800 hours, the British now begin to land. And they land, the Rangers are going to land on the left, and they're going to go up a hill called, today we call it Baldwin Hill, and they think the French might be up there. There's nobody there. Once they see there's nobody there, then they're going to come across and join with the light infantry and attack those French that are over here by the pontoon bridge. Grenadiers are landing in the middle, and British light infantry is landing on the right to engage the French who are over here. So pretty soon the Rangers come across and they drive the French out of there pretty quickly. At the same time that the lights and everybody's landing, Bradstreet takes his bateaumen, continues down past Mossy Point Boatyard and down toward the pontoon bridge. And that's where the boatyard is right there, and that's where the pontoon bridge over those rocks. And that's what it would look like from the mountain. So by noontime, this is amazing. They land the whole army on the western side by noon. Now, they probably still got some guys out in the water with supplies and some of the artillery, but the bulk of the army is landed by noon. And this is the disposition, get a perspective of what everything is. So this is the landing zone up in here. This is Rattlesnake Mountain or Mount Defiance. This is the Portage Road that goes down to the center of Ticonderoga. The chute coming out by Ticonderoga. Heights of Carillon right here, and that's the fort. To get you a perspective, aerial view of it. So at 1200 hours, Lord Howe decides he wants to use speed, and he's going to send the army moving forward along a faint Indian trail along the western side of the chute. He forms 4 columns, and they're going to march. So by noontime, they're on the march. So they're going to go. This is Moneypenny's map. So this is the normal portage way. This is the waterfall here. This is how they go. He thinks their French are going to oppose them, knock down trees, etc. So he's going to follow this way of coming around. And that's the map drawn by Moneypenny. And that's what it would look like from an aerial view. Now, why don't you go down the Lachute? If you haven't been there, that's why. There's 7 waterfalls that look like that. And not a good place to go. So they're going to go along Bear Mountain, which is basically Baldwin Road, and head down toward the Burnetts Brook, which today we call Trout Brook. Now, they're going to get lost and bogged out, which absolutely makes no sense to me. All they had to do was follow that little yellow line. How hard was that? And then they wouldn't get lost, and, the road doesn't look too bad there. So they get in there, and the troops get stuck in quagmire. The ones closer to Bear Mountain get hung up in big trouble. So the columns are 4 columns heading that way. And now they start to separate. And again, Abel Spicer, the Connecticut Regiment, his regiment is very much broken to pieces. And this is going to go on all night. They're going to be wandering around all night in the woods, in the swamps out there. So as they're moving along, the columns get separated. The ones closest to the river follow that Indian trail, which is Fitch and Lyman's regiments, are moving faster. Howe's group and Putnam are coming up the second one, and then the regular troops are coming up here. But they're getting further and further behind as they go. Rogers has already moved forward. He's crossed the Burnetts. So now they're going to come up to where the Trout Brook, or they call it the Burnetts, joins together here. And that's where the battle scene is going to be. This is what the battle site looks like, where it was going to take place. This is what that path would look like. And it doesn't look, it didn't look like that now. Now it's all farmland. Excuse me. So once they get to just above the Burnetts or Trout Brook, Lyman and Fitch meet with Rogers. Rogers and his Rangers have already crossed the Trout Brook. They're probably sitting up where the hospital is in Ticonderoga today, up on that high ground. They've already crossed. Their mission was to find a way across the Burnett's, and if they can't, to cut down trees and create a bridge so the Army can follow. So they're probably right in this area right here at that point. All of a sudden, at 1600 hours, they are hit on the left flank by those lost Frenchmen that have been wandering around in the woods for 3 hours. It's an accidental hit. Now, I think, and historians have wondered what they were doing, I think they were trying to get back to the pontoon bridge. And that's what their plan would be. Because there's journal entries that when Rogers and the Lights overtake that camp, there's stuff left there. Officers' swords, wine bottles, all kinds of equipment. I think it belonged to the 350 guys that were out on Rogers Rock, and they were trying to get back. But that's my opinion. Now, here's where they are, and now Putnam and the Rangers and Lord Howe are coming up behind. So once that French starts to hit them on that left flank, the Connecticut troops turn and face and engage. Lord Howe, here's the shooting, runs up there. Okay, and this is where that meeting place. The French are coming this way, the columns are coming up this way. That's Route 9 North, heading into Ty, the Lachutes over this way, perspective. So that area right there is where the meeting took place. It's a surprise battle. And it's a victory for the British. They just clobber. They get 150 prisoners. They kill lots of them. The French try to swim across the Lachute. Many of them drown. But Lord Howe hears the sound of the guns. And that's his only mistake of this idea, is he rushes forward, leading the Lights up there, and Putnam's guys, and he is killed. I don't know who that good-looking guy is. He will sign autographs later. That's an amazing picture. When we redid this in 09, I was the guppy that had to play Hal, and newspaper guy caught that picture. I don't know how I didn't break my neck. Anyway, so a dark cloud follows over the army because Lord Howe, Augustus, is loved by the army. And this is what Henry Babcock of the Rhode Island troops says. Never did an army gain more advantage in so little time whilst the late Lord Howe was alive. But soon after that, we became a confused rabble. So he dies, and even the French comment on how it really screws up the British. And there. And it disheartened the English. This is Bougainville's journal. And again, he was loved by that. So the reports reach the French camp. Their grenadiers go over by the eastern shore to try to have support. Some of their people do survive swimming across, but 150 of them are taken prisoner. So it's a great victory for the British. Although they're going to take tremendous casualties overnight with friendly fire. All those provincials and regulars are wandering around the woods lost, and they're trying to get back to where the landing zone was, and they're shooting each other at night. They lose more from friendly fire than they did from the French. So they stumble back all night. So now Montcalm is informed that you got to get out of here. They're still down the center of town. So they completely pulls his French force back to the heights of Carillon, and they're going to start building fortifications up there. So right after this, he is informed and his officers decide to go. So the morning of the 7th, after all that debacle, the British are at the landing zones. That's where the battle was the night before. The French are now at the heights of Carillon and at Carillon itself. So that's where they are. Again, this is the bridge. The next morning, they have a meeting. They rebuild that bridge, pontoon bridge that went there. The French had cut it and let it float down the river. But there's a series of rocks. It's not very deep right there. You can actually walk across it on certain times of the year. And so they rebuild the bridge. And then they're going to move up and attack. So that morning, Bradstreet again leads a force of 1,000 men. 5,000 men. They move up, they clear the road. The French did cut down some trees. They take 2 light cannons and axes, and they move up the Portage Road, which is the Portage Road in Thai today. At the same time they're doing that, a force of 1,200 Rangers and light troops do what Lord Howe had asked them to do before. So they go back down that Indian track, come around the top. Now, Lord Howe is criticized for this maneuver, but he wants to move fast and engage the French right away. I think he had the right idea, because look at this. At this time, the French are all in here. There's a few of them over here. But if that whole army the day before had come all the way around, if Lord Howe doesn't get killed and he continues that march, they swing all the way around. They're on the north side of the Lachute. The French both of them are on the south side. He could have cut a good number of them off from the fort. It could have been an interesting battle. Again, I love what ifs. So this is what the waterfalls downtown looks like when they get there. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon of the 6th, the British are now in charge of everything down in the center of town. This is downtown. The waterfalls are right over here, right there. And the morning of the 7th, the army is now busy, the French army that is, busy building a fortification. They have a T. They're chopping down trees and letting the branches lean out front, leaving stumps out there. And this is what they're talking. Officers, axes in hand, show the example. Flags are planted on the works. And that's what the heights of Carillon look like from the walls of Fort Ticonderoga. And you can see, if you put artillery up there, you got a significant advantage. So the French are busy building the fortifications up on the heights, which is right there. French lines are built in a semi. This is very steep where the Lachute is. Very steep on this side. They fish hook this. This is a plain right here, but that plain is under the guns of the fort. So they fish hook it a little bit. And it is a slight slope coming this way. So they continue to do that. So they build an 8-foot high wall, sandbags on top. They do cut some loopholes in the wall. It's 8 feet high, logs stacked up, pyramid style, with a ramp in there. That's the reproduction we did for this 09 250th anniversary of the battle. Men worked with such ardor on the line, and it was defensible by the evening of the 7th. 1,500 hours, the British Army is down in control. They do send some people up on that ridge just outside where the baseball fields, where 22 cuts through. So they're up above that. Now, back at the landing zone, the French prisoners are now put on what we call Prisoner Island. Used to be called Mutton Island. And it's not that big, but they got them out there. And then the next day, they are escorted down to Fort William Henry. Well, it's not Fort William Henry anymore, but down here to the head of the lake. And probably Lord Howe's body is brought down. That's a controversial subject too, but I think that's probably what it was. So there's a map with Prisoner Island. That's what it looks like from the top of Cook Mountain. Now, Rattlesnake Mountain above the Lachute is looking right down on top of that. And the French have done interesting. Colonel Leon McCullough, the Canadian Highland regiments, has written several books on it. He comes up with the thing that the French had disguised their fortifications by putting pine boughs and stuff there. So it looks like a simple, just a bunch of brush piled up. And that's what the young engineer is going to say. The British are now in camp. They're still back at the landing zone, moving artillery and supplies up. And then they're in the waterfall area. They do occupy that ridge line right in front of what used to be the opening to Ticonderoga. Now it's the back gate, the way out. They're up on that ridge, which is the Treadway farm up there. French are on the heights and in the fort. Between 6 and 8 in the evening, the light companies of troops detached down. Remember, they were sent out toward Niagara under Chevalier de Leve. They reached the camp. So they get more reinforcements. And again, they make the comment, all day long, our volunteers exchange shots with the enemy's light troops. So those guys are up on that ridge, and they're out front. So the French do get some more reinforcements. Not that many of them. Oh, sorry. And this is what the fortifications would have looked like. And we rebuilt this. Even Cyril did some of this work. Can't believe we actually got him to work. So this is what's there. And that's substantial. That's 8 foot high. And it took us a long time, almost a year to do it. Now, one of the problems with Pitt micromanages the campaigns. He's 3,000 miles away. So one of the things he does, he sends the bulk of the engineers and the bulk of the artillery with Amherst up to Louisbourg. And so Abercrombie is short on artillery men, and short on engineers. Montresor is his main engineer. Montresor gets sick before they embark, so now it falls to this young, just newly minted engineer, Clark. And he is going to be a good engineer. He doesn't live, though, but he's the one that's going to tell them that, hey, we can just push this wall over, and etc. And he's up on Mount Defiance, and he thinks it's there. Now, at 5 o'clock in the morning on the 5th, the French beat the general alarm to get ready. They've got grenadiers and light infantry out front of their lines, out about 150 paces out. They've got Abattis, which is all that junk out front. And this is where we are. Now, the British Indians finally show up with Sir William Johnson. He has about a couple hundred of them. They go on the side of Mount Defiance, and they start shooting at the French. They're too far away. They're not doing anything. So the French are on the heights in the fort. The British are still in their positions, and that's how we begin. So he's got these Indians with him that Bougainville reports. And again, they're not going to do anything in the battle. Now, they do bring up a couple of whaleboats, and the artillery moved up, and they built barges. Because Clark has said, I think I can position that artillery in a good place. And what he wants to do is right there. So he's away from the range of the fort, and he's right in line and can enfilade fire right down the French lines. That's his idea. So he wants to be right there, shooting down that way. That's his plan. It's approved. So they're going to send the boats. So in the morning of the 8th, there's a hasty meeting of all the generals. So they're arguing back and forth. Another scout goes up and says, yeah, it's not that bad. They have a fortification, just a few logs, and another breastwork. We can knock that all over by a Highland officer. They also just argue back and forth, and Abercrombie leaves because he's tired of them arguing. They're trying to decide, do we attack in line or do we attack in column? They finally decide to go in column because they think it'll be easier to get through the bateaux. Now this is important. These are the instructions. And the key points here, exactly how to form the regulars. And this is the key. They're to march up silently. They are not to do anything until they get to the enemy. And they're not to do anything until everybody is ready to go at one time. So they are not to go one regiment at a time. They're to wait until the entire army is there. Then they're all going to attack at one time. They're going to go up silently, not fire their muskets until they get within the earthworks of the French. The provincials, their orders are, on the left, the Rangers are to be. and bateaumen and so forth. And in the rear of the Rangers are on the left are to be the New York regiments. Remember that. Morning of the 8th, the Army beats to attention, and they're ready for the fight. And they did not know whether to resist. This is an interesting part of the morning. Montcalm has some queasy feelings about this whole thing. It is certain then that we had been obliged to adopt the latter course. His army would have been killed or captured. So he's not sure. Do I do what they do in 59, blow up the fort, go up to Crown Point, or do we stand and fight? He is not sure early in that morning. But Peugeot, another French commander, says if they had decided to try to retreat, they would have got clobbered. So at 10 o'clock in the morning on the road down by the sawmill, the British Army begins to march. At 10:00 hours, those Indians over on Mount Defiance start shooting, and the French, this is Bougainville's comment, we amused ourselves by not replying. They're out of range. They're just being an annoyance over there. The bateaus and rafts are being loaded with 2 6-pounders each. And they are on those rafts. They're going to go down the chute. 1100 hours, the Army begins to move forward. First, the Rangers and light infantry move out, then followed by the provincials, then the regular army. One thing to note, when you look at old maps, you will notice that the road that we now have today going into Ticonderoga is not the road that was there. The road at this time is closer to the Lachute. It's over right on the edge of the Lachute. So the road is further away. So troops take up the position to start the battle. This is the fortifications. And the bateaumen are here on the left center. They're in the center. The Rangers are in the center, between the center and the right, and the lights are over on the right where they're supposed to be. The bateaumen are where they're supposed to be. The Rangers are not supposed to be there. They're in the wrong place. Now, the provincials move up, and the two that move into position. The Massachusetts regiment goes from center to left, and the New Yorkers swing around, and they're supposed to attack on that left flank, or the right flank of the French. Now, 1200, the rafts are loaded, and they start down the Lachute. At 1200, the French are watching the British start to advance. Half an hour after noon, the English army advances. At 12:30, the French advance guard fires on the British advance troops and then retreats, pulls back. And they fell back in good order. Now, the pickets are starting to be driven in. But look where everybody is. The bateaumen are in the middle where they're supposed to be. The Rangers ain't supposed to be there. And the light infantry, they're pushing in the French. So they're driving in the pickets at that time. Now, over on this left flank, and again, the minute the first shot fires in war or battle, all hell breaks loose. You might as well tear up the plans, because nothing's going to go the way it's planned. Remember, the Rangers are supposed to be in front of the New Yorkers. They're supposed to be clearing the way. The New Yorkers are supposed to be behind the Rangers. The Rangers are not there. So the Rangers, by some mistake, instead of taking part on the left, employed themselves firing on the enemy right. So they're over here. They're not supposed to be there. So the Rangers are supposed to be protecting the New Yorkers. At 12:30, Delancey's New Yorkers cause the attack to start prematurely. So they think the Rangers are in front of them. So they just move up and they engage the French. And all of a sudden the shooting starts. Now, The Rangers, by some mistake, again, they're here. They were supposed to be over here. They're nowhere near where they're supposed to be. And again, Abercrombie will blame this on the entire army being screwed up. At 1300, Haviland is coming up with his regulars. He hears the firing on his left. He thinks everything started, and he goes, "Oh my God, I'm not ready." So he starts to push forward and engage, because he hears the New Yorkers over there engaged on the left. He orders Rogers to move forward and begins the attack on the right. So they're attacking on the right because they hear the noise on the left. And then everything starts to fall apart. Now the lights keep on pushing up this way. The first column comes close to the breastworks and is pushed away. This is what should have happened. All the provincials back here. And then the regulars right here. And then the regulars were supposed to pass through the provincials that are up front, and the Rangers, and the bateau men, and they were supposed to attack in column. Well, I got the X's, they're not there. They're still on the road coming up from the sawmill. So it's a mess. So the French are over there, and they're talking about saying, remember, this is French left, it's the French left, and they're talking about their troops are engaging on the left. At 1400 hours, more troops start to move up, and they start engaging the French in the middle, in the center. Everything is falling apart now. And then what should have happened is what we showed you before. The regulars should have passed through and attacked in column. Remember the orders, the entire army will move and attack at once. At the same time, at 1300 hours, the artillery barges that have been going down the chute have missed where the young engineer wanted them to be. They go floating on down. All of a sudden, they're within range of the French. They see them. The French had already ranged their guns, so they knew exactly how much powder, what angle to put the barrel to hit that spot. So they clobber those rafts coming here. And this is what the fort's here, so the chute's coming this way, and that's what it would have looked like in the water. So they start opening fire right away. And the French were ready. They had pre-ranged those guns. Now, what should have happened was, and again, probably when the artillery gets in position, they were supposed to fire, and that was, I think, was supposed to be the signal to start the whole battle when there was artillery. So they're not there. So everything begins to fall out of place. And this is what one of the Royal American officers says. The fort would have been in our hands that moment if the plan had been carried out. Now, from that position, the artillery, from that position, they're out of range of the fort can't get them, but they could have fired right down the French lines with enfilade fire. French would have had to leave after the first 2 rounds. They couldn't have held that position. I think that was supposed to be the start of the battle. Now, 1330. Remember, the battle's been going since noon. For an hour and a half, General Abercrombie shows up. And he's right here. Now, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, because people say he wasn't there. He was there. He arrives at 1330, half hour after the initial attack begins, but a half hour when it all begins. He is in a very good position to control everything, except everything's already happened. And the reason that spot is so critical is now he can see where that artillery barges were supposed to be. He can see the French lines, and he can see his own troops. Perfect command and control, except everything is going awry already. The fog of war. And Abercrombie, the ignorance of troops led to the loss that day, nothing else. So the battle goes, and it rages between 13 and 1700 hours, and goes. So at 13:10, Hadelman's attacking in the middle. Now, every commander is just doing their own thing. So I hear, oh my God, those guys already started. I better go. Guy on my right, oh, well, he started, I better go. So all day long, it's in and out, in and like pistons. They're going in and out all day long. So everything is falling apart. And you just can follow it along by regiment. And again, the New Yorkers are over there. Remember, they started this whole thing. They're getting clobbered. They take the highest casualty rate. And the Massachusetts guys are right here. They take the second highest. Now the Black Watch shows up a little after 1:30. Now they're way over here on the road. All of a sudden they hear the firing. They run across the whole front to get to where they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be attacking over on that British left flank. And again, here's their effort to get to the left. This is an officer of 44th. So by 1400, Hadelman, who rushed in, has ordered his men to fall back. And again, as I said, it's like a piston. They're going back and forth, in and out, and beat the retreat. By 1400 hours, the 42nd and 46th Highland regiments are ready to move forward. Now, one of the things that Montcalm does that's really good, he's got men in reserve, he's got munitions in reserve, he's got water casks in reserve, and they mention it. So anytime there's a breakthrough or a weak spot, he rushes men there. Anytime they need a musician, he's able to rush that musician. Water casks, not only for drinking, but also in the journals they talk about men went out with buckets of water because musket fire and cannon fire creates fire. And remember, all that brush is out in front. So the French are out there throwing water on it so their wooden earthworks don't fall apart. Water casket saved the day. During the action, several of his troops go out there, courageously passing back, get the flames out. Now at 1430, the Highlanders start to move forward on that flank. Okay, remember this is the center. And that's that plain over there. And here's what the French are talking about. Now, more French colony troops start to come up. And nobody's bothering them down here. They're stationed in that big plain, which is the back gate of the fort, if you know where that is. You're coming in, well, now it's the front door. It used to be the back door. But that big area there, they didn't bother fortifying very much. They didn't have time because the fort's cannon can reach it. But they put a lot of the Canadians right in there. Well, nobody's bothering them. The Highlanders and New Yorkers are attacking this way. So they decide, well, we're not going to stay here. Let's go attack them. So now the French are shooting at them this way, and now they're hitting them on the flanks. That's why they're taking so many casualties. New Yorkers and Highlanders. They're getting clobbered. 1500, now the 55th and 60th Grenadiers are attacking. And again, people are just doing, officers are doing their own thing. 1600, another group now arrives from Crown Point. So they've heard the firing and they've come down, so they are added to that group on that plain right there. So they show up. So they got more troops. We're only talking 100 guys here, but it's 100 more than they had at the morning. Now the red flag incident was, and they thought the British saw the flag, and it's been a big controversy. French claimed that an officer was waving a red handkerchief on his sword, or it was the upper colors of the Roussillon regiment. And so the British thought it was a surrender. So they club their musket, they go marching up to the wall. All of a sudden the French see them and start clobbering them. So they're really, really mad. They get struck right there. So they get within 1500 and then they get clobbered. So that made them there. Now this is David Perry of the Massachusetts Regiment. And I'm going to read it because I think it's unbelievable. They killed our men so fast that we could not gain it. We got behind trees and stumps and covered ourselves as we could from the enemy's fire. The ground was strewed with the dead and dying. It happened that I got behind a white oak stump, which was so small that I had to lay on my side and stretch myself, balls striking ground within a hand's breadth of me every moment. And I could hear the men screaming and see them dying all around me. I lay there some time. A man could not stand erect without being hit, any more than he could stand out in a shower without having drops of rain fall upon him. For the balls came by the handful. That's an example. So the battle rages on for over 6 hours of hell. And guns sounded like thunder. And the doctors had more than they could do. Imagine the courage these men had on both sides to stand up to this withering fire. Through the fear that they had, both sides, through the sights of men dying, through the noise. Remember, there's almost 12 to 14,000 men engaged. Through the smoke, through the smell. Finally, at 1700 hours, the retreat is ordered. 1700 hours, the Highlanders are really mad at what happened at the Red Flag incident, so they start to attack again. They are going to have the strongest attack of the day. They actually have some men that get over the wall. So the Highland regiments push all the way up, some just with their broadswords, and then the French bayonet them as soon as they're in there. But they do reach, some of them do, but they're dispatched. Again, Highlanders with repeated courage, and both sides acknowledge that. At 1730, the final attack takes place. And by this time, the regiments are not regiments anymore. They're amalgamated groups. Officers probably say, you come with us. Your group, come over here. We're all going back in one more time. Come with us. Finally, at 1830, the order to retreat finally reaches the last troops. So they've been fighting for 6.5 hours. So now they start to pull back. The provincials, Connecticut and Rhode Island, have been held in reserve. They're ordered to form up along with Rangers and the lights to cover the retreat. And again, the French see that. French lines, they're exhausted just like everybody. They're waiting for the next attack to come. We even thought they would try the next day to take their revenge. That's Bougainville. A breastwork is ordered on that ridge line, which is the Treadway Farm, which is right in front of what used to be the front gate. And that's what there's a big plain up there, there's a flat land up, so they build first there. They're ordered right there. 2300 at night, they're ordered to leave their position and go back. They are astonished. The British provincials and regulars cannot understand why they're leaving. But they're ordered to go back and take everything with them. Anything they can't carry, destroy it. Bradstreet does a great job keeping everybody, because now the men are panicking. So 5 guys are jumping in a bateau that maybe hold 12. So he's starting to organize that retreat. And again, little did I think that we should be ordered to march back to William Henry. And much to the surprise. The next day, the British withdraw from the lake. The wind comes up behind them, so they're able to actually sail down there. And that's a Zaboldi painting. And just so you know, it does work. We've done this right there. And so they're able to go all the way up the lake and reach William Henry by nightfall. One of the funny stories is a Connecticut company is ordered to go across the lake and guard for a French landing that can bother them. I call this the forgotten troll. For years, I thought it was up by the paper mill. There's a point of land there. I thought they were there watching, see if any French came down from Crown Point. But over the last dozen years, I've changed my mind. And I think it's where the Fort View is. That's where they were. And the reason I think it is because there's a gap right there. Mount Defiance is over here. There's a gap right there. And if the French had by boat landed there, which is Fort View Restaurant, for those of you who know it, there's a very easy walk over that gap. And it would have put them right on top of the landing zone. So they would have an advantage. I think that's where they were positioned. But the next day, Waterbury sends their guy back to the beach. He said, I don't have any orders. What am I going to do? He waits a while. Nobody shows up. So he sends another guy. This guy goes out, and an hour later comes running back and says, boss, there ain't nobody there. They're all left. Needless to say, he said, we went directly, ordered the men to march as fast as possible. Pre-dawn of the 9th, and now the Indians had to go out and kill any of the wounded that was still there. They killed them. Montcalm had no food. He had no way to take care of prisoners. You know, it's barbaric, but war's barbaric. We buried our dead, so the French they still think the British are there. Finally, the next morning, they send some volunteers out to go as far as the waterfalls, and then the portage to find out where the British are. They come back, they're not there. They're gone. So on the 10th, they realize that everything is there. It's a great French victory. The remains of the British are abandoned. They've abandoned their equipment. They've destroyed everything they couldn't carry, and so forth. So at the end of the battle, these are the numbers. Again, take them with a grain of salt. British lost almost 2,000, 11%. French only lost 500. Remember, they had a small number. They actually, percentage-wise, lose more. The biggest was 647 out of the Black Watch, or 64% casualties out of the Black Watch. Provincials lost 345, the bulk of them being Massachusetts and New York. So that's your casualty rate. Again, please take it with a grain of salt. What did the French do right? The abattis, putting all that garbage out front. True story. When we did the reenactment, these pictures were all done by a friend of mine, John Tishy, for the 2009 reenactment of 250th. We had guys get stuck in there, reenactors, that had to be pulled out by 2 or 3 other guys. So just imagine what it would have been like with people actually shooting at you. The other was the 8-foot high log wall, and you can see it's substantial. And by the British stalled on the 6th and 7th, it gave the British what they had worried about, the French what they worried about, time to build the wall. The other thing they did is they had 2 men loading, 1 man firing. So that meant they could maintain a firing rate of 6 rounds per minute or more. So that they were passing 2 guys loading, passing the muskets up, and 1 guy firing. So what did he do right? He stationed ammunition, water, men behind the lines. He had good command and control. He had a smaller area to work with. What did the British do wrong? They lost Lord Howe. No doubt in my mind, British win going away if he's still alive. Lack of good intelligence. Again, part of that goes back to the Battle of Snowshoe I talked about. Rogers does not have the quality of Rangers he had before. The weeks leading up to the fleet leaving on the 5th, Abercrombie tells all the provincial companies and regiments, I need 10 men from all your companies to act as Rangers. And if you can't get enough volunteers, you are to impress them or draft them as Rangers. He doesn't have Rangers. Broken chain of command. Everything falls apart after the first shot. Just bad luck. Lord Howe dying. You know, he rushes forward. The fog of war. Once everything goes to hell, it gets worse. Failure to start the campaign on time. And again, why? Lack of equipment for the provincials to get there. Now, this is Nathan Whiting, Connecticut officer, and the guy I portray most of the time. And he blames it on his men being impious. And he says, many soldiers of my regiment neglect to attend divine service. Some have been so wickedly impious as to say to no profit. We have prayed and worshipped and still have not been blessed with success. He's writing home to his wife. Where was this guy? Abercrombie has been criticized by historians and writers as being hiding at the sawmill. Never went to the battle. I say he was at the battle. He was where I told you on the map. About 15 years ago or so, probably more than that now, Colonel Ian McCullough of the Black Watch of Canada discovered a map up in Canada. And on it, like many other maps, similar, he saw the letters GA. Couldn't figure out. Everything else he knew. All of a sudden it dawned on him. GA, General Abercrombie. Abercrombie was a seasoned soldier. He wasn't a coward. He'd been in Flanders. He was up there. This guy, Thomas Gage, that's the general at the sawmill. Nowhere have I ever seen a notation on anything that Gage does. When Lord Howe is killed, he now becomes the second in command of the British Army. You never hear a word in any journal or anywhere. Now remember, he was in the lead element at the Monongahela with Braddock. His command in that lead element of Monongahela in 55 is annihilated, wiped out. Myself and several other people think he was suffering PTSD and stayed at the sawmill. And that's the guy journals are talking about. All right, the rest of the season, go quickly and wrap it up so you guys can go out to the bar. They go back to here. There's rumors they're going to go again. They're not going again. So they've built a fortification on the entrenched camp over here, built a stockade for it. They actually start to cut down part of the hill over here where the battlefield park is. French Indians will continue to attack the supply lines. Some great stories about that, about Robert Rogers. Putnam gets captured and taken up to Montreal, and so forth. Hope for another try. Finish lineman of Connecticut. I really fear I must again bear the mortification of returning to my friends in Connecticut without conquest over the enemy. Greatest French victory. And Montcalm states, and Bougainville writes in his journal, we had a miracle. I trust in God. He fought for us on July 8th. When they put the cross up there, Montcalm writes, what use is a general or a soldier or a great timber wall? The cross, that is the victory. Here is God. It is God himself who triumphs. So that's what the French were thinking. It's the French high water mark. From this time on, France will fall apart. They surrender Montreal in 1760. English are in shock. Basically, they're starting to say, you send the regulars over here, you lose more ground every day. You know, send another regiment over, they'll be in Boston by tomorrow. Abercrombie starts to paint the blame game and starts to go back. He blames everybody. He's removed. Bradstreet finally gets permission to do his dream and attack Frontenac, and that starts the British cascade of victories, and it turns the tide. And he will capture in August the French fortification at Frontenac, which is a big blow. The British under Amherst will capture Louisbourg, and Fort Duquesne will fall. Thank you for your attention. anybody interested in more reading?
What we'll do, we'll have to take time for a few questions. Our own Bruce Venture, who's experienced at this, has never seen a microphone he didn't like.
Yes, I can't wait, I got it.
Bruce, get the microphone, and Bruce will go in the audience and raise your hand if you have a question for John Eric.
Yeah, we'd like to have you speak into the microphone. Do we have any questions? Wow, you really covered it. No, I see somebody back there.
So I sense you think that Abercrombie has gotten a bad rap. I sense you think that Abercrombie has gotten a bad rap, but whether he was there or not, it was still a debacle,
Yes.
right? And you still think he's gotten a bad rap?
No, I think he gets the bad rap from the fact that he was not to be the tactical man, moving the troops in that plan. He was to be the logistics man. And that's what came from Pitt. And that's what he was really good at, organizing and making the plan. Lord Howe was supposed to be the tactical, the young genius. And if Howe doesn't die, I think they just sweep right around and crush him within a day. So I think he gets a bad rap, but I don't blame him because it wasn't his strength.
Wasn't his job.
Right, and in Flanders, he wasn't a leading infantry officer or a combat officer. He was a logistics guy in Flanders also. So that was his forte. And now all of a sudden he's thrust into this role. And I think the plan, I mean, remember, every one of his officers on that morning of the 8th signs off on the plan. So all those officers had that Council of War. They sign off on it, every one of them. And my big question is, where's Gage? You know, he's supposed to be second in command, and we never hear from him. So I think he gets a bad rap from the fact that he was over his head.
Kind of like a Philip Schuyler, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
be careful now.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, what did they all eat? There was
They-
a lot of them.
They were issued 6 days rations before they left here and went there. And they would have had pork, and they would have had beans, or not beans, peas, and things of that nature, hardtack, not hardtack, but biscuits. Very meager supplies. Now, they did stop at Sabatay Point and cook. They did have a lot of supplies in the boats, but they had not been unloaded yet. So they had it, but it wasn't ready to go yet. So that would have been their basic rations. So pork, beef, dried, salted, and then biscuits of some type. Would have had probably flour with them. They had the supplies, but they just hadn't really unloaded. Yes?
So why do you think that Johnson and the Haudenosaunee decided to stay up on Mount Independence and not really join the fray?
Well, they came really late. They only got there on the morning of the 7th. So they came really, really late. And they weren't enamored really with the British anymore at that point in time. So they were holding back their, they basically went because Sir William Johnson cajoled them into going with him. So I think they were very happy to let these, remember, Native Americans do not want to attack a fixed fortification. They think that's dumb. So they see these two armies lining up with cannons and just blasting away, and that is not how Native Americans would fight. So that's part of the big reason. They just think these white guys are crazy. And so going over there, and we'll just make some noise and raise hell, and if we see somebody, we'll ambush them. So that's why they're over there. It's just not their style of fighting.
Okay, anyone else? Yeah, oh. Okay, boss.
I wonder if you could tell me the name. You mentioned a Royal American officer whose journal you talk about. Do you remember what his name is? I'm doing research on him and I
No, the source I had, that's all it said. And I don't know that, an unidentified royal officer. I was going to say, perhaps Ian McCullen's books might have something in there, because he's done a lot of research on that group. He's got several books up. Well, that's the article there, but he also has written several books, and you might get the information there.
Okay, well, I just want to say one thing. It's amazing the number of men who fought in this battle that ended up in the Revolution. You had Charles Lee, you had Gage, you had Haldeman. Stark, Rogers. No, a whole bunch of them. I didn't prepare to say this, but anyway, there's a whole bunch of them, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting battle. All right, well, thank you very much. He'll stay around as long as you want. And if you want to go